Without a doubt, Konami is one of the most important companies that helped shape what video games are today. Castlevania, Contra, Suikoden, Silent Hill. These are some of my favorite gaming franchises, and are a big part of the reason why Konami is and probably always will be my favorite game publisher. But for me, the game series that I most closely associate Konami with is Ganbare Goemon, or as I knew it growing up, the Mystical Ninja. When I hear that famous jingle of theirs, I'm flooded with memories of the hours I spent as a kid playing the first entry on the Super Nintendo. The last proper Goemon game was released in 2005, and since then the character and IP have pretty much been turned into a template for pachinko slot machines. For me, it's a painful sight. Kind of like seeing a favorite toy that was once loved and played with being relegated to collect dust in a museum or on some collector's shelf. Though I guess that is better than being tossed into the furnace. The steady decline of Konami's importance and influence over the years has made prospects of a Ganbare Goemon comeback pretty grim, and recent changes in the company regarding a shift to mobile platforms seem to be the final nail in the coffin for this beloved series. But instead of focusing on the negative, how about we go back to a time when things were looking great for Konami, and the future of Ganbare Goemon was bright. 1991 saw the release of two Ganbare Goemon games in Japan, one of which was the Super Famicom's excellent Yukihime Kyuushutsu Emaki that would eventually be localized for international markets as The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, and the other being Sarawareta Ebisumaru for the Nintendo Game Boy. This was the first of 5 Goemon titles developed for the Game Boy family of handhelds, which consist of this game, a Zelda-style action-adventure game, 2 role-playing games, and a side-scrolling platformer. Sarawareta Ebisumaru translates to something like Kidnapped Ebisumaru, and that's exactly what the core of the story here revolves around. One day, Goemon is just lazily lounging around his house, as he always seems to be doing in these games, when he suddenly receives a letter from Jubei Yagi, who informs Goemon that he has abducted Ebisumaru, and that he must come to the distant province of Hizen if he ever hopes to see his portly pal alive again. And so begins another of our spiky blue-haired hero's adventures. Sarawareta Ebisumaru is an action game that closely resembles the first Ganbare Goemon Famicom game, Karakuri Douchuu. It sticks very close to the gameplay and design of that game, while improving on several key areas, making it much more enjoyable in my opinion. Goemon can of course run and jump, as well as fight using his trusty pipe, but as expected his abilities are quite limited starting off. He moves about at a sluggish pace, the distance of his jumps is pretty short, and the range of his pipe attack is distinctly Asian. But by hopping over or around gourds scattered about each stage, you can find power-up items like a mask that increases movement speed and jump distance, as well as a cap that replaces Goemon's pipe with point projectiles. Taking damage will make these effects go away, but if you can collect enough of each power-up in a row, you can increase speed greatly with a special mask item, or temporarily turn into a twirling top of terror with a special cat one. These aren't the only things you can find by frolicking about though. There are coins that pop out of pots, and hidden staircases that usually lead to an area containing money and normal power-up items. There's a good variety of enemies in the game, but most are taken out with one hit, and for the most part just try to bring the pain by walking straight into Goemon. You know, since Sarawareta Ebisumaru came out around the same time as The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, I can only imagine that had it gotten an international release, the localization team would have renamed the characters and enemies in this game to some pretty wacky or absurd stuff, much like the SNES game is infamous for. I wonder what kind of awful names they would have come up with.
Oh, look at that, another Goemon game. Another need to make these funny sounding Asian names marketable. Well, this guy's some kind of samurai, so let's call him Kendo Ken. Well, this little fella's a pickpocket, so he's gonna be Kid Picky. Look at that hair, he's a bad boy, Johnny B. Bad. Move over, Bomberman, he's Bomberdad. What a long nose. Telling any lies, Pinocchio? He'll shoot your eye out. It's Bonsai Bullseye. Oh, I thank you very much. Arigato Bato? You better do the right thing, Pike Lee. That packs quite the punch. Suck it to me. This guy's a nightmare. A nightmare on Japanese Elm Street. Now this guy, what do we call him? Got it! The Birdman of Aikido. Perfect!
Yeah. Anyway, the original game was broken up into stages that could only be completed when enough passes were collected so you could move on through a gate. And while Sarawareta Ebisumaru is also broken up into stages and passing through a gate signifies the end of a level, the process is more involving and interesting than its predecessor. Most areas require Goemon to complete a variety of tasks before the gatekeepers will let him through. Things like helping a girl find her missing brother, beating information out of a foreign sailor, and navigating through a sea of fire to find a special item to help defeat a boss. Oh yes, unlike Karakuri Douchuu, there are quite a bit of boss fights in this game, and almost every stage will have at least one boss to contend with. They aren't too difficult to beat, but the battles are pretty varied and are a lot of fun. In towns and villages, there are all the usual Ganbare Goemon stops. Food stores, which provide a variety of dishes that restore HP, shops that sell rice balls and armor, and inns where you can catch up on your Z's and recover any lost energy. Of course, like most other games in the series, there are public bathhouses that also restore lost hit points. And of course, like most other games in the series, you have the option to perv out and enter the ladies' bath. 8-bit steamy nudity on your Game Boy. Look at that smile. He's just so happy. Aside from finding money in pots, funds can be acquired by downing enemies and by meeting up with women who are, related to Goemon's side business. Additionally, there are a few minigames here and there which can make or break the bank. There's a dice game, a Japanese card game called Kabu, an obstacle course, archery, and the totally thrilling vice of gambling on tortoise races. Really. The Ganbare Goemon crew of Goemon, Ebisumaru, Sasuke, and Yae hadn't been established yet at this point. So unfortunately, the mechanical ninja and heroic kunoichi don't make appearances at all. This also applies to other series staples Wiseman and Impact, with only Goemon's kinda sorta girlfriend Omitsu showing up briefly. At one point in the game, you do take control of a little girl named Miko, but she plays exactly like Goemon, and is only playable for a single level. Her section is very frustrating, and is easily the most difficult part of Sarawareta Ebisumaru, since it involves a lot of platforming. In this game, you cannot change the direction of a jump mid-air, and the best you can do is halt the jump midway by pressing back in the opposite direction. This is a technique that must be used for many sections, and it wouldn't make platforming so infuriating if it wasn't for the fact that most platforms are surrounded by water, and falling into water means instant death. You only have 3 lives, and when they're all up, you have to continue at the beginning of the current level. At least there's a simple password system if you need to take a break from all the watery death and try again later. Passwords are also important because Sarawareta Ebisumaru is quite lengthy for a Game Boy game. It took me about 3.5 hours to beat all 8 stages, which is about the same amount of time I spent completing Kuroi Koi on the PlayStation 1. As far as extras go, there's an extended ending sequence that plays if 7 hidden jewels are found in secret passageways, as well as a sound test which can be accessed by inputting the famous Konami code at the game over screen. Ganbare Goemon Sarawareta Ebisumaru is a fantastic game that might be small, but does the series justice, and is a must-have for those who love the Game Boy or the series. This standalone version is incredibly easy to find and very cheap. Sarawareta Ebisumaru was also included in Konami GB Collection Volume 2 with some updated Super Game Boy support, which was also eventually translated and brought over to Europe for the Game Boy Color. These versions are harder to find and quite a bit more pricey, however. Anyway, another Ganbare Goemon game down, and a ton more to do. Someday I'll have them all reviewed. From here on, Konami might not ever be quite the beloved game developer it was in the 80s and 90s, but I hope their legacy is appreciated and not forgotten soon. Let's all remember the great impact their games have had on us over the years. I know I sure will. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Import Gaming for the win, and as always, thank you for watching. This is Jimmy Hoppa. Take care.